Welcome to this episode of the 3 Minute Therapy podcast. And we're here almost every week. And we is me, Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist in remote, on Zoom, FaceTime, phone, and my co-author and partner, David Ramsey Steele, who is a great contributor to the book and also to our podcasts. Today, we're going to be discussing an REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy approach to panic attacks. So starting right in, often panic attacks start with some antecedents. Sometimes they're very subtle, and sometimes they may not even be evident, or you may not be aware of them. And they're usually some prodromal symptoms, such as you might feel a little lightheaded, you might feel slight dizziness or slight weakness. And then you start worrying yourself about that and start thinking, what's wrong? I must not get so anxious. I must calm down. And those demands lead to global evaluations like, I must not get so anxious, or I'll have a heart attack, or I must calm down, or I'll die, or worse. Or if you've had a panic attack in the past, then you might be alerted to what it feels like, and the demand, I should or must not have a panic attack like I did before, I'll go crazy. So that's some of the thinking that leads to panic attacks, and that leads not only to great anxiety and sometimes panic, but also often limiting your behavior. So if the first time you panicked, you're on a bus, you may avoid the bus in the future. Or as with some of my past clients, if you were in a supermarket, you think the supermarket brought it on, and you won't go into the supermarket anymore, those kinds of things. So it leads to avoidance, withdrawing, those kinds of things. And the main thing is more anxious or panic. David, did you want to add anything to that part of it?
Yes, well, I had panic attacks in my mid-20s. And I was, looking back on it, I was a classic case. I didn't know anything about REBT back then, so I couldn't read anything that was at all helpful. And one of the things that you mentioned, Michael, that I think needs to be emphasized is that very often when people have panic attacks, they believe that these panic attacks come out of the blue, when in fact, prior to the onset of the first panic attack, something is going on. And the sufferer from panic attacks forgets what was going on, or else doesn't see that it was significant. In my case, what was going on was I had this feeling that unsettled me a bit, that I wasn't in touch with reality. I was cut off from things. And I began to worry about this. And then I started having panic attacks. Later, I realized that this was due to the physical onset of short-sightedness. When I was in my teens, I had very sharp eyesight, not a bit of short-sightedness, nearsightedness, I think Americans call it. What happened was, quite rapidly, I became more nearsighted in my 20s. And I first began to suspect this when I noticed that I couldn't see the numbers on buses if they were a few blocks away. So I went to have my eyesight tested, and the optometrist said, well, look at that chart over there and tell me what you see. And I said, what chart? You mean that gray blur thing on the wall is a chart with letters on it? Anyway, I suddenly realized or confirmed my suspicion that my nearsightedness had grown very rapidly in my early 20s. So for the first time in my life, I had glasses. And suddenly this original feeling of being cut off from the world went away because I was in touch with the world much more intimately because I had glasses. And I could see details in things that I had not been observing because I didn't have sharp enough eyesight. So there was this period where something was happening to me that I didn't understand, and I interpreted it wrongly, and I started to worry about it. And then I had my first panic attack. So there was all that preparation, but at the time when I started having the panic attacks, I didn't see that this was cause and effect, which it was. I didn't realize that. And I had all kinds of theories, because I'm a theorizing sort of person, about what was causing these panic attacks. And I thought it was because I didn't have a clear enough aim in life or something like that, all kinds of pretentious sort of metaphysical notions that actually had nothing whatsoever to do with it. That's what happened to me. And all this is very typical. There's some physical change and that's unsettling, or some slight nervousness about something. And this grows, and then there's a panic attack. And then after a few panic attacks, the sufferer thinks these panic attacks all came out of the blue. And that's not true. They've reconstructed their memory to eliminate what was going on before the first panic attack.
Right. And even if they recognize what was going on before the first panic attack, then they incorrectly attribute the panic attack to what was first going on. So they try to avoid that, like slight anxiety or nearsightedness or those kinds of things. Another important thing you said, David, is that you don't realize often what came before it because they're slight, they're mild, they're easy to miss. So for the therapist, if you have a client who says nothing happened, it came out of the blue, don't necessarily go with that, but probe further and more deeply and ask some questions about possible antecedent feelings or events. But once you identify that, then and the person wants help with the panic attack. So you have the antecedent events and you have the panic attack, but the antecedent events are a antecedent or activating event, what comes first, what they experience first. And this is a good case of the activating event doesn't have to be an external event. It can be an internal event, such as feelings you have. And then you have C, the undesirable emotional consequence of panic. But as we always emphasize, A never causes C. And everyone seems to miss that. Psychologists, scientists, historians, everyone seems to miss that our emotions come from our thinking, not from situations. So it's not the political situation that depresses you, but you depress yourself about it, as a current example. Therefore, the question is, what's the B? And I've mentioned some common Bs. I must not get anxious. I must calm down. I must not have a panic attack, etc. So then the next step, once you identified your irrational beliefs, is to question, challenge, and contradict the irrational beliefs. Questioning means you take your irrational beliefs, such as I must not have a panic attack, and you regard it as a hypothesis, not a definite conviction, but a hypothesis, and you look for the evidence. What's the evidence I absolutely must not have a panic attack? Where is the 11th commandment stated that? Will the roof cave in if I have a panic attack? And the answer is always no. The roof won't cave in. It won't be the end of the world. I'll go on with my life unless I decide to commit suicide over having panic attacks. And they don't normally last very long, usually under a minute, although it may seem very long. But they all emotions tend to wax and wane, and panic attacks is no exception. Uh, and then, in order to prepare for panic attacks in the future, it's important to come up with reasonable perspectives on this that you get by questioning the must. I must not have a panic attack. And if you look for the evidence, you'll find no evidence for the must, but you will find evidence. It is uncomfortable. It is very regretful that you have a tendency to have panic attacks, and it is highly unpleasant. You'd be better off without them, but that doesn't mean they're the end of the world or you must escape discomfort. As Albert Ellis used to say, life consists of one discomfort after another. It always has and it always will, and there's no reason why it should not. In fact, I was just watching a YouTube talk by someone whose main thesis was discomfort is good. We grow from discomfort. We learn from discomfort. If everything goes along smoothly, then your life is not going to greatly improve. But if you have discomfort, that forces you practically to look at discomfort, what's causing it, and how you can avoid it better and make your life better. So the bottom line for me is question, challenge, contradict the musts. Musts of fictions like Santa Claus. There are no musts. If you have a must that's you have evidence for, put it in the comments below, and I'll give you an award. And but I've never found a must, a psychopathological must that makes sense. Or if-then musts and predictive musts, but no psychopathological musts that are reasonable. They all create emotional disturbance. They're all unempirical, illogical, unpragmatic. They don't work. So divest yourself of all your musts and shoulds, and then you'll divest yourself of your panic attacks. David, anything else you wanted to mention about panic attacks or final words?
Yes, I think in most people's thinking before they've encountered REBT, there isn't much difference between saying this must not happen and I really, really, really wouldn't like it if this happened. Those two things are close together in their minds. But actually, I think what REBT shows is that there's a crucial distinction here. And thinking in terms of musts can be crippling. There is a very popular science fiction novel called Dune, D-U-N-E, by Frank Herbert. And it's about a remote future where there has been a holy war against computers and they've been abolished. And so people are trying to develop the human mind in various ways to make up for this lack of computers. And one of the things that happens in there is that the central character, Paul, gets into a fearful situation. And he says this prescribed litany, or this prescribed prayer, you could say, to free himself from fear. And it goes as follows: I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. And it goes on like that for a while. So Frank Herbert really hadn't caught up with any kind of cognitive behavioral approach to therapy. And Frank Herbert didn't understand that that would be just about the worst way to respond to some feelings of fear, would be to begin with a prayer that says, I must not fear.
Yes, and there's a book along those lines called You Must Relax. And if I remember the author, I think it was Jacobson. I'm looking it up now. But so You Must Relax suffers from the same fatal flaw. Yeah, it's by Edmund Jacobson. You must relax, practical methods for reducing the tensions of modern living. So there are two errors there. You don't have to relax. You're human. You're going to be anxious at times. And the tensions of modern life are a fiction. There's just modern life, and then you create tensions about that. Something in modern life that you might create a tension about, someone else makes themselves happy about. So keep in mind, it's always our beliefs that cause our emotions. That's a simple idea, a very powerful idea, because if it's your beliefs and you don't like your emotions, you can change your beliefs, and most people don't recognize that. If you listen to how people talk closely, uh, no matter how accomplished they are or how intelligent they are, they're still saying the situation, the deadlines at work are the reason I feel stressed. Or my wife cheated on me. That's why I feel jealousy. It doesn't work that way. It's maybe one of the greatest myths through all human histories, or one of the greatest misconceptions.
Right,
Okay.
and this
Yeah.
myth was attacked by the Buddha, legendary figure, the Buddha, founder of Buddhism, and was attacked by the Stoics, especially Epictetus. So Buddhism and Stoicism come together in trying to undermine this pernicious notion, and they both come together in REBT.
Yes, yes, exactly. Okay, thank you very much, David Ramsey Steele, for uh, your part in the podcast and your part in writing our great book, 3 Minute Therapy. Thank you, Chris Rossini, for handling the technical side. Again, this is Dr. Michael Edelstein, co-author of 3 Minute Therapy, and we will see you again in a future podcast. And if you have comments, put them below. If you have questions, put them below. If you have criticisms, put them below. And especially if you'd like to volunteer and be a guest on our podcast, we always welcome guests. So please let us know. And if you're a therapist and you'd like some help with a client, you'd be a welcome guest. So have a good week, and we hope to be back in about a week.